Wish I could zoom in.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Well, here, I'll start. I'm Alicia Holland. I'm from Murder in the Rain, a local podcast. We focus on cases in the Pacific Northwest. And while we haven't yet covered Kyron's case, we have worked with Rebecca before on other stories. So I'll let everyone take a second to introduce themselves.
And I'm Rebecca Morris, and I've written 8 true crime books, 3 about missing people, and I was extremely honored to spend a couple years writing about Kyron and Desiree, and so that book has been out for 4 years now.
I'm Desiree Young, and I am Kyron Horman's mom. And I, by trade, am an accountant and manager, but in my off time, my second job is to travel the United States and talk about Kyron's story and train law enforcement and provide my perspective, my support to families of missing children, as well as anyone else who needs it.
I'm Quinn McCullough. I'm Kyron Horman's older brother, and I'm just here to offer some insight and support my mom.
Real quick, if anyone in a yellow shirt could see about getting another microphone so we don't have to play hot potato.
Controls the speed.
So you guys worked together on your book, Boy Missing, which is Kyron's story, and we were talking about kind of that difficult line, and I would like to hear both of your perspectives of that line of we're working together and we're trying to get this story out, but we're not going to be best friends. We're holding these boundaries on both sides, and I'd really like to hear from both of you your experience working on the book and exploring that relationship that you had to build.
Well, I'm curious why you finally said yes. Because that was, it was 8 years after Kyron went missing. I don't think this one's on.
Hello? Oh, you just got to be a little louder. And here comes Linda. Okay, they're working on it. We'll be back with another microphone. Okay, so why you finally said yes to working with Rebecca for Boy Missing?
Or anybody.
So I had received many offers and letters from folks that wanted to tell our story. I would say that number one, it was because I received an old-fashioned letter that was handwritten. And the other thing was the message that she had to say in the letter really spoke to me, and I felt like she would tell Kyron's story in the way that I wanted it told. Others had different opinions and wanted to push that, and I felt like she was going to listen to what I wanted better. And so that's ultimately why I picked Rebecca and why we started this journey.
I will say, we didn't write it together. Author needs to be autonomous, but that she gave me, hundreds of hours and letters and photos, and I met the family, but I, really wrote it was just so, there's no way I didn't get emotionally involved while doing it, but it was not an as told to book. It wasn't, Natalie Holloway's mother with a ghost author or a ghostwriter or an author. And I think, I'm not sure if we ever signed anything. Sometimes I've signed something, just scribbled with people about, I give Rebecca the right to, use photos and words, but so I had been working with a co-author occasionally, and he came with me the first time we met Desiree in a Portland hotel, and I thought, gosh, how are we gonna, start? And she just started talking, just right away, and he went off to do other things. So, But I have actually, you know, it's the third book I've done where I've have gotten close to families, because you can't do a story like this, a book like this, without a family involvement. It just wouldn't be the same. It'd be about the case. And this is about the case, but I wanted this to be about Kyron's community, too, and the community that this crime took place in. To me, well, Agatha Christie said, the crime is the end of the story. It's everything else that comes before, and who the people are, and the setting, and the community that's very important. Desiree just let me kind of tell her, you know, kind of where I knew we were going at that point. And you know, you don't know what you don't know as an author. So I remember mentioning in the letter to her that I worked closely with other families on books with missing people, and they were extremely high-profile books. Susan Powell, Missing in Utah, and Marie Bird in Tacoma, and that, you know, I won the trust of them, of those families, by, you know, all I can do is be truthful and upfront, but there are times where you talk about difficult things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we kind of went toe to toe with, and this is where it becomes difficult navigating that relationship, is there was a situation right after Kyron went missing on Sunday, and you know, I'm exchanging Quinn for custody, and there was an altercation, right? And it was extremely horrible and upsetting for Quinn, for me, for our family. And this is 2 days after Kyron goes missing. And I just, you know, I really wanted that story told in the book as it happened. I was there, I experienced it.
With Quinn's other parents.
Right. And it was extremely hard. But we protected that and didn't tell the story quite as the way it turned out. And we also gave aliases. And at the time I felt super passionate about it, but I see now where it didn't hurt the story. It didn't need to necessarily be told, but it was just something at the time I wanted to prove a point, or, you know, whatever. I was angry still, whatever.
And I use that same example still, all these years later, about, well, there was this story where they're going to pick up Quinn, and there are the other in-law, you know, the other parents, and there was an argument. And I wrote it, it's in the book, but it's not quite maybe as dramatic or as volatile as it was in real life. I had to figure out how much of that is part of this book, how much of that is part of the story, and how much is just a quarrel, you know, but it is mentioned.
Yeah.
But you're right, I use that as an example too.
Yeah.
So we have a room full of true crime content creators and consumers, and I'm curious, as a creator and as people that have been on the other side of that, there are times where people feel like they know you or they're part of your lives, and I'm curious kind of what advice you have for either consumers of true crime content and or creators, what that fine line is, because you are involving real people and real families, whether that's advice or don't ever do X, Y, Z. So as a creator and people on the other side of that, I'm interested in hearing that.
I think Desiree did a great job of that, because I knew very early on, okay, she's not befriending me. We're not going to be best friends. We're going to focus on the story. And she was great at that. And even when I, went down to Medford and everything, and I think I still dropped you a Christmas card. But you're not becoming best friends. And I think, because I think I sometimes become who other people want me to become. If you'd been different, I might have thought, oh, this is, I might have gotten like too close. But she had such great boundaries And I had some from life and from books. And I just think that you actually set the tone for how is this going to work.
Yeah.
And I give you a lot of credit for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't, if you don't know me, I don't have a poker face and I don't hold back. And so, you know, one of the times she was asking me super uncomfortable questions and I'm like, Rebecca, please stop. Like, don't do the, and what else do you, give me your perspective. And, you know, and so, yeah, and totally, you know, and I said, just like, if I'm telling a story, just take it all in, and, you know, but she still, that's just who she is. And she comes up to me, hey, anything new? What are we working on? And I'm like, you know, so that was where I had to hold the boundaries. This is my life. And I know that I look well put together up here 14 years later. I still melt down all the time. And mostly when it comes to Quinn. But it's hard. And the media doesn't remember that this is a child. This is my child. And I protect him. And I can't stand that we're here. And it's hard for me to just open up the floodgates and show all the pictures and all the things, even though I know that I need to for the most part. There are some boundaries that I hold on to. There are those special pictures that I held back and I am not gonna let those go. And I protect Quinn. It was extremely hard to do. We would just be out at a restaurant and people would come up to me, super kind, big hearts. I just want to hug you, and I'd turn around and Quinn's gone. Like, where is he? He doesn't like the limelight. He doesn't like all of that. He's extremely uncomfortable because he cares about his little brother, and it makes him upset. And so I had to try and navigate that with him without upsetting him. And it was hard because sometimes people don't know that there are boundaries. And this is a life, and this is our life, and this is our family. That was the hardest part of that. And I would like to hear from Quinn, because I'm curious.
To the one who hates the spotlight.
I promise you quite the opposite now. I've had probably 8 years managing people, so that does a lot for you. Stage fright's a thing of the past. I don't like talking to a lot of different people. But that aside, I think as a freshman in high school, when your whole world gets everybody's eyes on it, it's quite a different thing, and I definitely wanted no part of anything to do with kind of the situation that went on. And teenagers, as you know, very, very emotional, even though they won't let you see. And so I kind of wanted to handle it my way in peace, and that made it really hard. So like she said, I did disappear when other people would come up to her, and I wanted to be left out of interviews and stories and things initially, just because I don't think I was ready, and everybody grieves in their own way, and I wasn't really sure how to handle it for a few years.
And you were how old?
15 when it happened, yeah. I will be 30 in October, so quite a change. But yeah, I think the biggest thing as content consumers is it's really easy to be there and to really invite yourself into that story, especially in something as captivating as true crime really is. And it is easy to kind of lose that line with it. It's actually happened. It is somebody's life. And as much as it's great to be able to walk up to that person and say that you inspired me or that you really had an effect on me, it is somebody's real life, and that's easy to kind of miss sometimes. But it's great to be able to kind of give back and to help people with our perspective, our experiences, and hopefully prevent similar things from happening in the future.
I can project. I'll just yell.
And you had mentioned boundaries, which we talked about earlier, and kind of in that same idea of this world of armchair detectives at times, and feeling a sense of ownership to a story, or oh, I know this part that they don't talk about, or oh, did you see how they acted, so it must be this. And you were saying you want to talk about this morning, but you ran out of time. during, you know, especially when it was first happening and it was interviews and it was chaotic, and you had to step back and say, for my mental health and my well-being, I have, like, I'm trying to breathe and search and process, and now you're deciding I am involved or I'm a bad mom because I can't do this interview you're demanding of me. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. I am going to give it all 150%. And I will keep going and going and going, no sleep, none of that, right? So when this came to us, I thought I just have to, you know, do every interview, everything, because I want to get Kyron's face out there and I want his story out there and I want everybody to know so that we can bring him home. I didn't realize that it is okay to put healthy boundaries on that. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't even initially when our PIO, our public information officer that was assigned to our case, when Mary would tell me, you need to put rules on him. You need to put rules on him and hold firm on that. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, I'm an accountant. Ask me to look at a balance sheet, I can tell you what it is. But I don't know what you mean. And so, you know, basically, we had people that were violating the rules. And she would come in there.
Peeking in the windows.
Peeking in the windows. Yeah, at the house. And they were putting up sneaky microphones to try and hear what our briefings were. And they were sending in fruit baskets with sneaky microphones in them.
Goodness.
And people don't tell you that this exists. It really happens. They want the story, and if you don't grant interviews, they will do anything to get the story. And so, you know, some of that was happening, and we also had the tabloid type places like Willamette Weekly who would come to our press conferences and stir stuff by asking a question that alluded to the fact of something that happened in our divorce. And of course they were acting like the experts, and so, you know, I understand that you were abused by your husband. What do you say to that? And we're all three standing up there going, what? You abused me? Who abused me? Wait, what are they saying? It was totally false. They pulled it from out of thin air, but they were stirring the stuff. And so that was, you know, ultimately we had to ask them to leave. And we've had others that we haven't granted interviews to because they couldn't follow those rules. I want it focused on Kyron. I want it truthful. I don't want you making stuff up. And we just need to focus on that. There's dirt, of course. Anybody who's ever been divorced, there's always dirt. It's not nice, it's not pretty, but unfortunately it is part of this story. But don't focus on that. I want to find Kyron. So that's what I want to lead with. And so we asked him to leave. And he has never been granted another interview again. And I realized through that experience and others, it's okay to follow boundaries, it's okay to set those boundaries, and it's okay to not just honor every single request. I can only do what I do. And what I do is, if they reach out to me and they make that effort and they make it super easy for me to just, oh yeah, I will absolutely give that person who does the hard work an interview and a unique scoop. I will give them some little tidbit somebody doesn't have. And I don't have a problem doing that. And that's what I've followed since. So for 14 years.
So I was a member of the media for a long, long time, 40 years in radio, TV, and newspapers in New York City, in Seattle, and in and in newspapers, and even in Portland. A lot of my career was in Portland. So I'm not, you know, I see a lot of terrible things that happens in the media, but I know that the messiness that the media saw of these two blended families, if you want to call them that, and so I was reading all of this, you know, years after it happened. I was catching up on what was said in the news conferences and Desiree's reaction, you know, in 2018 when I was writing the book. And I thought there were really questions that, you know, they had no business asking. They were interested in Terry Horman. They were interested in the marriages and the divorces and you know, what they assumed to be, I think they were going to even use the word messy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they did. Yeah. And I don't think it's up to a newspaper to decide, you know, what is messy.
Right.
You know, it's complicated.
Yeah.
So, and I remember, not to bring up something so painful, but early on when I was reading all of this, 2018, a lot of people were fixated on, well, there must have been something wrong if he wasn't living with his mother. If he wasn't living with his birth mother, there must be something wrong. And that was not the case. That's not what led to the sharing of custody.
Do you want me to speak?
Only if you want to. If you don't, we can move ahead.
The reality is I fought and fought and fought, and I didn't win. And it's hard when you're on the other side of that. And
It's very, very complicated. But I do think people, especially in the early days, fixated on what are the family dynamics here? And I still do. You know, it kind of helped explain the story, but it just sometimes cross the line.
Well, excuse me, that goes back to the consuming. You know, if they aren't selling papers because it's juicy gossip, so if we're not buying it because it's salacious, they're not going to print it. So that comes back on us as well to say, that's not, why are we talking about it?
And I can tell you, having been in TV newsrooms, and radio newsrooms, NPR even, CNN, Fox in the early days, the Oregonian, is that an editor will say, now I need you to get this. I need you to ask her, you know, blah, 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 blah. So sometimes the reporters, it's not necessarily where they would be coming from, but they're told, get this. And you can see that happening in the presidential coverage now too.
So let's transition to what we were talking about a bit before, and you touched on it in your first presentation today, that now you do training for law enforcement, and you told me about a moment, and I'm curious about how influential that was in you going into training, where right after the first big press conference and they were removing Terry from a van, that instead of bringing in the officer that had this really good relationship with her and maybe could have even gotten somewhere with her, they had the officer that everyone knew she despised come in and take her out of the van. So immediately there's animosity and defiance. I'm curious about that moment and how that inspired your future work helping law enforcement.
So one of the liaisons had coordinated with the church that was across from the school, and they hosted the media for several months after Kyron went missing, and it helped us a tremendous amount because they had a lot of equipment and everything, but it was always set up, and so law enforcement could go from the school directly over. It made it super convenient. Well, that first press conference, they organized for a van to take us over to the church. And they pulled it up around the back side of the church so that we weren't right there with the media and we could just enter into the back door without being bugged, right? And so we did that, and we did the press conference. Everybody's probably very familiar with that. It was the only time that I saw Terry show any kind of palpable, it wasn't emotion, it was, I think, fear that she was going to be arrested. I think it was more about her, but it was the only time I ever saw her express or see visually what was going on inside. And I thought it was the only moment that she would talk. Terry was big on, and for whatever reason, she always wanted to prove a point, whether it was me or somebody else. She's big on that, and she's the expert, she knows it all and all the things. Well, as we were entering the side room of the church just after the conference, she put her hand on me and was trying to talk to me. And I, at that moment, couldn't do that. I was at my limit, and I looked at Tony, and I looked at Mary, the sergeant, and I said, you need to get her off me, because I'm gonna kill her. And I think that that had an impact on her. And she didn't like it, right? And they rushed her out the back door, because they could see that I'm like there. And I broke down, and I was so upset that God didn't strike her dead right there. Seriously, that was what I was expecting. So we go out the back, and she's already in the van. We hop in the van, they shut the doors, and we're out there for a couple of seconds. And I think it was by design, I think it was orchestrated, but I don't know that because of the dramatic delay that it took. And so then all of a sudden the van door opens up, and I look, and it's Will, the detective that was groomed and like super perfect for her, her type, like awesome. Love Will, that's not his real name. And then Bob. Bob is the husband to the new sheriff of Multnomah County. Bob O'Donnell is awesome. He's not in Camp Terry, and I love him for that. He can't even fake it, right? And Bob was there with Will. And Bob said, oh no, Terry, you're coming with me to be interviewed.
Again.
Yep. And you could see her immediately shut down. It was gone. Terry was back, and it was gone.
So
it was done
the
at
cop
that
she
moment.
could flirt with
Yep.
was not signed for.
Yeah. So Will, the good cop, wasn't taking her, but Bob, the bad cop, not in Camp Terry, that cop was taking her. And she immediately shut down. And I believe that that was a pivotal moment in our case. And I speak to that when I'm training. Do what you do. You're not going to call an electrician to fix your plumbing problem. If you have that one investigator who's known for flipping people, known for getting people to talk, you use that guy for your interviews. You do that because it will make or break your case. Like, you have to use the person that's the expert in that moment.
I'm also interested in other things you talk to them about. Do you, when you're training with cops, do you tell them about how to talk to the family?
Oh, yes.
Just
yeah.
lost or something's missing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do. One of the things that bugs me is the C word. Everybody's going, what C word? But the C word, closure.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. So I talk to them about that. They use it all the time. They throw it around freely. Closure never exists. I don't care if you have answers. I don't care what family you are, what the story is. It doesn't exist. And I always tell them not to use that word because it really turns off the family. And I talk to them about remembering that they're human. One of the things I was talking about in the other room is Mary. She didn't know who I was. She was talking to somebody sideline, and I'm standing there. She had no idea who the bio mom was, right? She had no idea I was standing there. And she's explaining to this person, like a cop, right? Oh, the bio mom. And I was immediately offended, and I just like, what and who in the hell is this person? And my husband's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I went to the academy with her. I don't give a crap. Like, I'm about to punch her. She's offending me. I'm not bio mom, I'm mom. I'm the only mom. And don't, say things like that. And know the face of your family. Know who they are before you enter anywhere in the realm of the case, right? It's those things. The word normal, the N-word, I hate it. It doesn't exist. It didn't really exist that day, but it still really doesn't exist. Like, normal went out the door in 2010. Like, we don't know a life that is normal. We learn to survive, we learn to cope, but it's with tons of hours of high-paid counselors and providing tools that help us get through the day-to-day roller coaster. But honestly, we're still in the middle of the roller coaster. I can be at a workshop and I get a call. They found Kyron. And it happened just recently. They found Kyron, oh my God. And my heart is up and I am like running for the door and it's false. And then I'm down. And I have to function like a supervisor and I have to function like a normal human being. It doesn't exist. It's hard every single day and we go through the ups and downs. And it's just the way that it is.
I'd like to ask Quinn, how's this affected your life all these years?
That's a really good question. I like to, when I talk to my lovely wife, who's very emotionally intelligent and has brought me through a lot of this, I like to use the analogy, do you know when you order something on Amazon, you're really excited to get there, and then it just never gets there, and you're like, what is going, you keep checking the tracking, and then imagine if that just never comes. And then you just pile familial grief on top of that, and emotional attachment to that thing, and it's just still never coming. That's the analogy that I like to use, because you're just so invested in that one thing arriving and it never comes. And you just have to carry that with you every day. And it definitely takes a lot of work, like you said, a lot of counseling, to kind of get through that and get the tools in your toolbox to be able to just grapple with that on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely, I'd say, made me more emotional than I used to be, in a good way, and some bad ways. Some days are bad. I lash out like any other human being, but it's definitely put me a lot more in touch with those things and able to take on a lot more in my life. Grief kind of tempers you in a way you never expect, and so I don't tend to overreact, maybe like a normal person would. Very unsurprising, most things in life, but yeah, it's definitely hard to get through that, and it's taken a lot of years to really work on myself and be able to carry on day to day. I tend to have a pretty positive outlook about it though, and I just kind of try to focus on that.
Well, one thing I'll share with you is that Quinn is my stoic child. He's strong. He's strong and he will never show anything, right? And at 1, I used to have to beg him to hug me. Whereas Kyron is the complete opposite. He's my hugger. He's my emotional, big heart little kid, right? And so that was what I think was really hard for Quinn is Kyron is just that kid that thinks you need a hug all the time, and he come in the room and just grab you and hug you. And the little teenager over here would be like, ugh. And I think that's what he learned from it. And I see it with his wife and lovely relationship that he has, is that he's a better person now, because even though you can tell somebody you need to give that hug back, you'll never get that moment back, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. That's what he learned in a hard lesson.
So moving on a little to where things stand today, I know you both touched on Terry's arrest, so I'm sure everyone heard that, or lack of arrest. Rebecca was actually wondering where things stand as far as the grand jury, if they're still ever meeting, and also if through these years, if technology has allowed for any more advancements, even the smallest bit of clues or evidence that has been helpful at all.
So yes, technology is always advancing. It helps us do our jobs better. And in our case, yes. So we've had advances in cell phone technology and some things from Google and some of that stuff that has helped us. It helps us get a step further, right? So we're always like, okay, there's another piece and another piece. And well, we already know this, but this confirms that other piece, right? And we still cannot get to the point where we can convince anybody with Multnomah County to do anything. Right now, we're waiting on Mike Schmidt. He won't do anything. So I'm waiting for him to leave. And hopefully, the new DA is going to do something. We've had new participation from the FBI, and they're showing new interest in our case. They are helping us do another case review, which is awesome. It's huge. They are compiling it, digitizing it, getting it ready for court. And we have them thinking outside the box, right? So participating in ways that we haven't seen before. And I think that that's critical because you have to pivot sometimes. And with the case stuff, we have a lot of circumstantial evidence, but we also have some physical evidence, but we don't have Kyron. And you have this resistance in law enforcement to prosecute a missing child case for whatever reason when you don't have the child. And I keep falling back on this one thing, right? Kyron relied on one person that day. One person. That was the one person who's responsible for his disappearance. That's it. That's where we're back to. He was in the classroom, he got his picture taken, and he walked out the school, witnessed by everybody. He walked out with Terry Horman. He didn't come back. That's where it lies. It's that simple. So I'm hoping that the new DA is gonna hear that and wanna do something about it.
So the police wait a little bit to say that there were eyewitnesses. Did they wait? Why do you think they waited? To not let Terry know?
Well, to be honest, I leaked it. Yeah, so we had a briefing with law enforcement, and Coach Norm, our affectionate name for him, sorry, Norm, he was a deputy DA with the DA's office. And Coach Norm broke it to me that Carson, Kyron's friend, was outside and saw Kyron. And sorry, and we're filmed. Sorry, I didn't even think about that, just added Carson. And his grandma and his sister. And they all see Kyron walk out the school with Terry. And his bus driver, she was there. She saw it too. So these people saw Kyron leave with Terry. And it wasn't known. They talked to me about it as a mom, and I couldn't hold that back. So I leaked it.
I'm curious, so, I apologize if this is known and I'm ignorant to it. Have you considered or tried pursuing any kind of wrongful death lawsuit or something to hold her accountable to some degree? And
Yeah. So in 2012, and everybody's nodding, yeah.
Oh,
She did. She's got this, yeah.
She was very young.
That's
It's okay. Yeah, I filed a civil suit in 2012. Many of you know that. Here's the reality of it. A lot of people don't know this unless I talk about it. There's a lot to that responsibility, and law enforcement would not give me the case voluntarily. Here's the deal. I could have challenged it and won. I was told no problem, right? If I would have moved forward with the civil case, it would have impacted every single missing child case after that point.
You mean they'd have to share their case file?
So what it would have done was restricted what law enforcement would share with the parents of a missing child. And that would have been the impact of what I was doing.
But they restricted anyway.
Well, they refused verbally, but I could have fought it in court and I would have won.
Oh, okay.
However, this was you need to make a decision. Do you want to push this? Because you will win. However, this is the other side of it, right? And I didn't want that on my head. I did not want any law enforcement team to not share information with the parents of a missing child and be responsible for that.
Have there ever been any other people of interest besides Terry?
Other than Dee Dee Spicer, her friend. Dee Dee Spicer was missing from the lavender farm for the same 2-hour period that Terry was missing. And we know that they had burner phones after. We know that there's cell phone evidence. I'm sorry, Quinn, if you haven't heard this. There's cell phone evidence that Dee Dee did this. And
So we're gonna take a minute and open the floor up to anyone that has questions for anyone up here. I can bring you the mic so we make sure everybody hears you.
I don't want a mic.
Oh. I just want to make sure they can hear you.
Are Terry and Kyron's father still together?
no.
No. Okay.
In fact,
Good.
so not only are they divorced,
Okay.
but Terry is remarried. She manipulates a lot of people, and so she married a guy that needed citizenship, and so they both got something out of it. She got to change her name, and he got citizenship.
But she, moved to California.
Yeah.
She tried to change her name. Oregon wouldn't let her change her name. So she had 2 arrests the first year she moved to California.
Yeah.
One was, and this kind of gets lost along the way, and this is, my theory is somebody who does something like what Terry and Dee Dee do, they're gonna slip up again, they're gonna probably do something. And so Terry, though, was actually arrested for stealing a roommate's gun. And
A U.S. Marshal.
what was the other? And for stolen his car. Stealing
Yeah.
cars?
So she was dating a guy, and this guy actually was feeding us information, and she had stolen his car, but because they weren't in a domestic relationship, they weren't married, it was hard for him to prosecute for that, I guess, so they didn't keep her in jail very long. It was for the holiday weekend for 4th of July, which I loved.
Yes.
So it was, a few days. But yeah, that was the problem there. But that person also got stabbed by her. And then we were trying to get prosecution on that, and he kind of, lost his guts about it.
So I don't know if Terry will ever crack, because
Right.
she's impenetrable, but I think Dee Dee might, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or they'll find new evidence.
Yeah.
Hi, I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss and just for everything that's been going on. You all are so strong, and I had a question in terms of the fact that, Kyron is a little boy, and I feel like in true crime, there's more coverage for little girls. Do you feel like maybe that has kind of played a factor in, visibility and, more resources or things like that, as opposed to, I think I was in one room where they talked about Madeline McCann and others. I don't know if the question makes sense, but have you felt like him being a little boy, like maybe he didn't get as much attention or support as if he would have been a missing little girl?
Well, I've written about this. So Gwen Ifill, who's deceased but worked for PBS for years, she said in a speech maybe 15, 20 years ago, she talked about missing white woman syndrome. And that it's true, the attention the media gives to white children, cute blonde kids, white women, and I hope that the media is beginning to pay attention to that. But there's no question that happens a lot.
I'll say that I don't see, I'm ignorant, but I don't see difference. I don't. And I just know that I have to push my son's case, and it doesn't matter if they're not going to cover it, I just push it anyway. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and so that's my approach that I use, and sometimes I'm a bulldozer and I don't care. But I also am not above, I use my clout sometimes, and I had to in Clear Lake recently, and I hated that I had to do that. But sometimes it takes that for people to think you're legitimate and to put a stupid flyer in your stupid store, I mean, it's not a shoe I'm trying to sell. It's a missing child. So put his flyer up, and I shouldn't have to come in here myself. My volunteers should speak for themselves, right? And I shouldn't have to tell you I'm with law enforcement. I work for the Department of Justice. Put the stupid flyer up. Like, it shouldn't be a thing, right? But sometimes, yes, sometimes it happens, but I still just push the issue anyway.
Just for clarification, when you said that, Kyron's bus driver and his friend and grandma, I think you said it was, saw him leave with Terry, did they just see them leave the school, like that entrance, or they actually saw them get in the car together and drive away?
They left the school on the east side, so they saw them walking down the sidewalk.
She was parked in an odd space
So,
where you wouldn't park.
So if you are looking at the school's on Skyline, right? There's a little road to the left of the school that goes to the soccer fields. So as they were walking out the east entrance, they're coming down this way. And so they were walking, so the explanation or the description that law enforcement gave me, because I asked the same specific literal question, they explained it to me in this fashion, is Jennifer, the bus driver, said, Kyron was walking with her, which wasn't a surprise to her. Kyron was walking as if walking with her, but not holding her hand. She was holding on to Kiara. But they were walking together the same direction and down the sidewalk toward the street, which was odd, right? Because she didn't realize that Terry was parked off of Skyline and on that front little dirt road that goes to the soccer fields. But they were walking together as if they were, together, but not holding hands. So I think that that's very telling to me.
Desiree, so how old was Kiara?
She was almost 2.
There was a baby along the truck.
Yeah.
This entire morning.
Right. Yeah.
Where is that daughter now? What's the status of that daughter now?
Oh, she's so sweet. Well, you wouldn't believe it, but she's 15. She was going to Skyline up until this last school year. And she's awesome. She's great.
How much do you think she's been told?
She has been told.
So she's
Absolutely.
with King.
Yes, she's with King.
And
Yeah.
And she was with Terry for some time?
No.
No, Terry was her stepmother. She
No.
was living with her.
No. Terry was her mom. But when Kyron went missing, about a month after Kyron went missing was when they found out about the murder for hire plot. And thank God, King did the right thing and filed a restraining order. And so Terry was not allowed to see Kiara at all. And so that was when he had come to me and Tony and asked for us to take Kiara. His thought process was, I don't know what his thought process was, honestly, but he knew that that would be a good move, with the exception of my fear was that because I'm not Kiara's natural mother, that Terry could potentially, you know, fight that. And I would hate for that to ever happen. But Kiara is great. She's, you know, doing as good as she can. I think similar to Quinn, if you ask him. You know, we all are just kind of.
There's no contact with Terry.
No.
Now, there was a time where if she had adhered to the divorce
Yes.
decree and made child care.
Yeah, so she was
She
ordered
could.
several things stipulated in the divorce decree. She needed to pay child support. She had to have, you know, a house that, you know, provided sleeping arrangements for her and all the things, right? She had to have a job for a certain period of time. She had to clear herself with law enforcement and tell us where Kyron was. And she wouldn't adhere to any of those. So it was a no-go anyway.
So she probably hasn't seen that child since she was here now.
Yeah.
So she just chose to walk away. So
She
didn't
chose
have
to walk
talk
away.
about Kyron, she just chose to walk away.
Yep. Which is telling.
Yes.
Any more questions? Couple more? Let's try shouting.
She's getting her steps in.
I know, in memory of Donahue. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Knowing what you know, and law enforcement knows what they know.
Mm-hmm.
You really know who did it. You just don't have the body, you know. He's deceased. If you called in on a tip to the Multnomah County Police, they would just tell you to go fly a kite. They know. There's nothing more to know. If you say, I thought I saw that boy in Idaho just yesterday, they would probably laugh it off, wouldn't they? They would
No.
not.
No, they're still investigating tips that are coming in. And they send the FBI whenever it's in another state.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is the family's belief on what Terry's motive is here in taking Kyron?
The family's belief, well, I can tell my perspective as Kyron's mom. So I would say that her motive was to hurt Kane and I. In one thing that she did, she took out Kane, who she was mad at because he was cheating on her. She took out me because she just hated me. Don't ask me why. She just hated me. She took out Miss Porter, who got her job, and Ben Kiefer, the principal, who made the decision to pick Miss Porter over Terry.
Wow. So tell me that situation, Miss Porter over Terry. I don't know that.
So Terry originally had a license to teach. She was drinking and driving with James. James is similar age of Quinn, and James was in the car, and she got a DUI. Well, she lost the privilege of teaching because of that, right? So she could never renew her licensure. So she had still applied for Miss Porter's job when it was vacant, and Miss Porter ended up getting it, and Ben Kiefer was the one that made the choice, and so she hated that. Uh-huh.
So she has another child named James?
Yes, he's an older,
Where's he?
He's a Marine, or
who was a Marine, yeah. He's living in Oregon still.
He shows up on Facebook.
Yeah, he has engaged in weird ways. I just want to be clear because of the uncomfortable situation that we're in. James is just like his mom. She is a sociopath. James, unfortunately, is as well. And he has surfaced and provided threats and other things. And so when we've done events sometimes downtown and stuff, we've actually had to have law enforcement around us because he has threatened to act on certain things. And so it's unfortunate, but you know, Quinn is very familiar and knows that if he ever reaches out to just, you know, not engage. I don't understand what motivates him at this point to really even be involved at all, but I think it's really just about that narcissism and the attraction.
Yeah, way back.
I may have missed it, but did Terry have any criminal activities prior to Kyron's disappearance?
Yes, she did. Terry is well known to law enforcement. When she was living in Roseburg and with her parents still, she tried to kill her parents by burning down the house.
That's what she
Yeah. And law enforcement was going to charge her, except the parents would not follow through. She failed polygraphs. She couldn't answer for what had happened. The circumstances were highly questionable. And the reality is that Kane knew about this before Kyron ever went missing. I learned about it after Kyron went missing. And so she had done that, and then there was also a murder for hire plot. She had been sleeping with someone who was too young, and she had an ex-con try and kill him. She lures him to a park, and the guy is gonna have a romantic lunch with her. Well, he started becoming a nuisance. I guess he was too attached, and I can't remember what law enforcement said she said, but there was something there that he was getting too attached and it was becoming a nuisance to her. And so she gets this ex-con to show up at the park while they're having this romantic lunch, and the ex-con pulls out the gun to shoot this guy, and this guy actually tried to protect Terry and get in front of her. And she goes, "You idiot, he's here for you." Oh yeah. She's a special person. Right? Yeah.
Are we shouting?
Yeah,
You're shouting.
I can shout. I was a
It's all up there.
prosecutor in Oregon for over 20 years, not in Multnomah County,
Okay.
including homicide cases. And if I'm going to prove a murder case, I have three main things I have to prove. I have to prove that someone's deceased. I have to prove that the person on trial is the person who killed them, and I have to prove intent. If you don't have a body, that first element, which is normally nothing, becomes huge. As a prosecutor, I would think years of age progression photographs of a missing person would undercut my ability to prove that a death has actually occurred.
Oh.
And so I wondered if there is another way, because for families to keep cases in the news while at the same time not burdening me with extra burdening me with having to prove that this person is not coming back, that this person is not simply missing.
I've never heard this.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Of age progression, you want the missing child to stay a child. I personally, I never prosecuted a missing person case. There have been a number of them, as you know, prosecuted in Oregon. But if I had to prove that someone's dead, I would not want there to be a lot of information out there suggesting that maybe they aren't.
Right.
Including the age progression.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to keep the case
Right.
in front of the public.
Right.
You know, that's how you get your chips, that's how you keep law enforcement on the ball.
Yeah.
How do you do that? It's just something I've thought of with
Wow.
regard to your situation. So I know her.
Oh.
As a prosecutor, I was a reporter, but I did, you know, not but I've thought
That
about
is.
this.
Yeah.
You know, if
Many
Yeah,
people
because
have
what is
brought
that
that up.
balance? You want people
Right.
to be on
People
the
brought
lookout
that up.
because you are hopeful.
Absolutely.
right,
But then, yeah, that's very.
but at the time, I'm in court with that defendant.
Right.
I don't want all those missing person pictures
Okay.
sitting
Huh.
up there.
That's just me.
Okay.
It's something I wondered about, and I've wondered about it with regard to the situation, because I know there's others.
So one of the things that, I don't know, keeps me up at night, you know, my husband talks about it all the time. When it comes to an adult and
Right.
proving that they're missing,
Right.
it's fairly easy in that they have a signature, right? You're carrying a
Right.
cell phone, you've
Right.
got your debit cards,
Right.
you've got all this signature, right? And we can track you. With a child, that does not exist unless it's a child that has a cell phone. Kyron didn't have his at the time. How do you prove that? But I think in my opinion, in my mind, children only rely on the parents. And in my mind, that seems more simplified, and maybe I'm just dumb, but you're relying on that one person to take care of you, and they're ultimately responsible for you. And I think that that's the answer. I don't know. I'm probably dumbing it down too much, but that's how I think.
It's the end of the day, dumbing down.
Yeah. No, totally.
We're all there with dumbing down.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, there's the alternative that someone else took it.
Right.
Back when I started being a prosecutor, missing children never were found alive years later. Since then, that has happened.
Right.
You have a jury that's grown up with the idea of stranger danger, who knows Elizabeth Smart, you know, who has seen that it actually has happened, that a kid has been gone for a decade
Or
more.
J.C. Dugard.
Yeah.
I mean, holy moly.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Who would have believed this?
Oh, I know.
But the jury knows this can't happen because they've read about it. in the
Right.
magazine.
I know. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hear you. It's the rare circumstance. But yeah, I was at a missing child conference in Jacksonville, Florida, when the 3 got found in Ohio, and oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how elated all of us were. Oh my gosh, this is promise, this is hope, this is all the things that we do this for, you know? And you just always hold on to that. I know, yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Middle back over there?
Yes, I just was curious, does Terry have family or anything that she's close to, or?
So her family is her parents in Roseburg. Her parents are still there. They still own the same house. They were in teaching for years, and they retired there. They're well connected in that community. It's my understanding that she still sees them. I don't know what degree of that, but they have always been enablers.
And
So
they raised a lot of money.
they did.
To
They
fund
provided money for
most
the
famous
defense
law
attorney.
in Portland.
Yeah.
For her.
Yes, hey.
I'll say these things really quickly, but I'm also an attorney. And I used to do abuse cases and family law cases. And I noticed that when you made that comment about custody, there's a lot of women who don't have primary custody, but they're great mothers, you know? And I think we need to quit shaming mothers, because there's a lot of parents that share custody.
Yeah.
And we should not be, that's
Right.
not where we should focus.
Right.
But also with abuse cases, I have found that with gender, we often don't treat women as harshly as we treat men when they're being questioned. And some of the most horrific abuse cases I dealt with were committed by women against very little children.
Yeah.
That were for stepchildren. And I'm wondering if she took a polygraph.
Yes. Yeah. So, so to speak a little bit more, even though I was being a little shy about talking about it, when we went to court again to fight for custody, it came down to money. The judge said no because I had tons of medical debt and I wouldn't be able to take care of the boys in the same fashion. And then it was also about separating the boys. And so she held on to the fact that they both had lived in Portland their whole lives and that she was not going to uproot them. And so that was really what it came down to. And I was crushed when I had to come back and tell the 14-year-old Quinn that it wasn't gonna happen, you know? And all the things. But it was hard. It is always hard. So when it comes to, you were asking about the polygraphs. She had taken 2 polygraphs from start to finish. She failed both of those polygraphs. The questions that she failed were you involved in Kyron's disappearance? And were you with Kyron after 8:45? So those 2 questions were asked of all of us, and those 2 questions were passed by all of us except Terry. And then on the 3rd polygraph, she got too uncomfortable and walked out.
Did Dee Dee take a polygraph?
They tried to get her to take a polygraph. We were negotiating with her. The problem ended up being that she was feeding information to Terry at that moment, and they shut it down.
So that Dee Dee couldn't tell them,
Yes.
Terry, here's what they asked me.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I just had a question for Quinn. I have a degree in psychology. I'm curious, when Kyron was getting all the attention, what would you recommend to like police and family for people that have a missing kid for another child in the family, how they should deal with that?
That's a really good question, actually. Oh man, it's hard to think back on all those times. When everything happened, I was questioned by FBI and questioned by law enforcement, and then I was kind of left to my own devices, and I was already a pretty independent child, just kind of growing up in a split household does that by nature. But I definitely think enabling the sibling or the close relative, cousin, whatever it is, to be able to just either get counseling if they need it, or be able to spend their time as they are looking to do, and be able to take a break from that. Just the amount of pressure and the amount of grief that comes with that is really important. Because I think for a long time I kind of just held on to it, and that made it really hard for me to go and be a teenager. I became an adult at 15, and that was really hard on me. And I think when everything first happened, I just played with Kiara to feel like a kid again and to feel that connection again for 36 hours without sleep. And I just was the one with the child because I was searching for that connection. I never got that because all of a sudden my brother was just gone. So I think being able to have that connection still with family and not feel so separated is also really important. Although I know some of it's part of the law enforcement process, but it definitely, we all came together to grieve over this intense thing that happened, and then immediately just got split up and separated, and that isn't always the best thing.
Do you know Kiara?
No, I haven't seen her since that day.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because that's one of the things that people don't realize is, I've gotten to see Kiara, but it's been limited, and those are the victims too. I mean, Quinn lost his childhood, and those are the things that nobody really talks about. Quinn had a hard time with, he would stuff it and keep it inside and not talk about it because he needed to be strong for his mom. You didn't say that, but I know you said it before. And he just wanted to be there to support me. And I remember one day I walked into the bedroom, and I don't know what triggered it, but he was in the bedroom and he literally just blew up. And it was like stuff and throwing, and I just am standing there like, what do I do with this? I don't even know what to do. What is happening right now? And at the same time, I was relieved to see that he was processing something. And I hugged him, and that was the first time he really broke down. I'm mad at her. She betrayed our trust. I should have protected him. And I had no idea before that moment that he felt any onus or guilt about that. And that was terrible for a 15-year-old to feel. Because I was thinking it was all my fault, right? I was just clueless about what he was going through. We're just trying to, you know, find Kyron and go forward and all the things, and that's the part that you forget or you're missing, or, you know, all of that. So that's what I would say to that.
Any more questions? So moving forward, I'm curious, you know, work that you're working on, and for you guys individually, what's next?
Well, I'm writing a follow-up to the Susan Powell book. She's in Utah. Her husband was the only suspect. He moved his 2 kids back to Puyallup, Washington. They were living with his father, who was a pornographer and lawyer, and was arrested. So the kids were removed from that house. This is a story that just goes on and on. And placed in state custody in Washington State. Went to live with the grandparents temporarily. Well, that's who, you know, of course, Josh hated him, and there was some of that. That's why he killed Susan. And so they were fighting for custody, and the state of Washington, you know, other parents didn't want to be in the building where he was going to be having his visitation. So they allowed him to rent a house, pretend he lived there. There's a saucer on the shelf for visitation with his children, no security, nobody around, except the 65-year-old visitation supervisor, who, you know, she's a hero of mine. She was very sharp. She knew what he was capable of. She arrived on February 5th, 2012. There's nowhere is it written she's supposed to hold the kids' hands. It's not written. They tried to blame her in a lawsuit. He scooped up the kids. She smelled gas. She called 911 a couple of times. The 911 operator was asking these inane questions like, well, what color is your car? And if you're supervising him, who's supervising you? Things that he said later, he knew who Josh Powell was, but he wasn't thinking. So the house blows up while she's there, right in front of her. Completely in flames, completely blown up. And he had killed the children and then set the house on fire. And so her parents have been trying to sue the state of Washington for 14 years. And they finally had a jury trial, and the judge was, you know, they were limiting, how many happy pictures of Susan and kids can you show in a courtroom? They were limiting things like that. When the jury awarded her parents $100 million, the biggest case of that kind in the country, the judge said, well, I think you're just being sentimental. And he cut it to $30 million. The state appealed the verdict. The Coxes appealed everything, or appealed the jury award. He also said to the jury, well, it's not like they were going to grow up to be professional athletes. You know, when we're talking about the value of life for a 4- and a 7-year-old. How do you know? And so the state appeals court upheld that the verdict, the $100 million, and the state is guilty. And so I'm writing a book about a trial, which is kind of strange, but there are people in it, there are very dramatic moments. And the horrible thing is, it's still happening in Washington State. It's still happening around the country. The attorney who helped win this case told me last week he has 2 cases that are similar or worse than Charlie and Braden's. That reunification, states place the children back with the student parents, the sociopathic parents, the drug, you know, and there are all kinds of missing children because they were placed back with their parents. Because reunification is supposed to solve everything, and it doesn't. And so I'm still very involved with those people, that family, those kids who are dead, and this trial. So I've been writing that book for 4 years. And my condo in Seattle, I think I have 1 million pages of trial transcript. Because my approach is always, you read everything. You can't, you don't know what you don't know. You have to read it all to know, and you have to talk to everybody. So my new deadline is to finish it this fall. And it's not a very commercial book, but I think the fact that this is occurring everywhere, and it'll call attention again to, you know, that a state can continue to make those same mistakes with returning kids to those families that are not equipped. And they know they're not equipped to raise these children. They've proven that before.
Right.
That Oakley Carlson, who's missing now for 2 years. You know. Anyway, so that's what I'm working on.
Oh, goodness. I'm working on working a lot, which is terrible. I'm trying to step back. I am focusing more on Kyron stuff and training law enforcement and traveling. I want to work my way into retirement here soon. My husband has been retired since 2020, and I need to, you know, hang out with him a little bit more. But outside of that, you know, Kyron's my passion, and so that's what I'm working on, and that's what's important to me. And we're gonna keep searching for him, you know. So we're gonna work with the new DA, and I'm hoping that we're gonna move this forward. And
so you started organizing searches when they quit.
Well, I started organizing searches in the first year. So my approach has always been to help them with resources that they may not have. So usually I would find out about a tip. They were going in, doing some searching, and then they would come out with kind of a short list of areas that they wanted to search again. And so I would coordinate with them and try and help offset some of that. And it wasn't always high risk areas, but it helped to rule out areas. So yeah, I've been doing searches for a long time. I was using Class Kids because they have all of the GPS equipment and all of that. They work with law enforcement really well. They have the certified dog teams and all of that Multnomah County requires. So we were doing that, but the foundation had to dissolve this year. So who knows? Maybe that's what's in my future, because there's a need.
Was it Perry class or what was it?
Poly
class.
Yeah.
Poly class.
Yeah.
And
So-
you had mentioned you have volunteers. Is there, if people have interest in helping in searches or helping you
Absolutely,
in ways,
yeah.
what's the best way to go about doing that?
Reach out to our many, you can stop by our table that we have here. We have all the Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all of that stuff on a card. But if you reach out to our pages and you want to help, we're always looking for volunteers. And it's as simple as hanging flyers. I don't care. If you live in California and you want to plaster all the rest areas from, you know, we're not picky. I mean, we'll take all the help. So we're going to be going to Klamath Falls here soon to put some pressure on Dee Dee. We just got back from Clear Lake, standing out in front of Terry's house. And so.
Oh, Dee Dee was down there.
No, Terry.
Oh, Terry.
Yeah, Dee Dee's in Klamath Falls.
Yeah.
So we're gonna hang out in front of Dee Dee's house, and so we're gonna put some pressure on some people, and you know.
And you used to go to Roseburg
Yes.
to Terry's parents' house.
Yep.
You know, with big signs and.
I love that. Public figures.
And how are you?
Working every day on being better than your name. This has taught me anything. It's that, you know, life is fleeting, and we can always be kinder to each other. You never know what somebody else is going through.
Yeah.
So working on that, and waiting on my package to come home.
Yeah.